We're snorting cap rates and shooting up cash flow here at Deal Junkies. Welcome back to Deal Junkies. I'm Gabe Johansson. I'm here in the studio with Trevor Howard and Mike Nuss, and not Dane McKinney. Where's our new host? I thought you said Mark was going to be a regular host.
We forgot to let him know.
Oh, well, you told him on the show. I listened.
He didn't remember, I guess.
He doesn't know he's supposed to be here?
Yeah.
All right, where's Dane?
Dane's in Hawaii again.
We just got back from Hawaii.
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago or 3 or whatever it was. But
what's Dane doing in Hawaii? Don't know.
I don't know.
He's got a date?
Is he with
I don't know.
Brandon again?
No, Brandon's here. I just played pickleball with him. All right. Well, we're going to record a podcast for you guys. I'm happy to be back in the studio. I think you guys did a great job with Mark, by the way. I liked those episodes, especially the parts where you talked about me being so cool. That was my favorite part.
I didn't say anything about that, but Mark did, yes.
I'm kidding. Mark did. What a sweet guy.
Your head's really shiny today.
Is it? I didn't shave today. Is that why it's so shiny?
Maybe.
Oh, it might be my gray hairs
Maybe
poking
the
through.
light,
The light's hitting me.
Yeah.
I'm glowing. I'm glowing. No, I really like listening to you guys talk about how to tell somebody that just lost $300,000. And
let's extend that today.
Just get over it. Just get over it.
Just get over it.
Let's just do a deal. You lost $300,000. Let's just get over it.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah, Mark said just spread it over to your other deals. They don't do other deals.
That's the problem of losing a lot of money on your first deal.
Yeah. Brian Miles, my mentor, used to tell me, he said, you just can't stub your toe on the first deal.
Yeah, you can lose money and you can break even, but don't
wipe yourself out on deal number one.
Don't take all your momentum away.
That's why, though, it took over 3 years for me to get my first deal.
Yeah,
because it had to be a for sure
but
100% winner.
And see, that strategy works, right? Works for you. I don't think you want to go too far that road. But
I mean, the problem is, like you guys talked about, and that I teased Mark in the beginning. He underwrote 300 deals or whatever before he bought his first one. I raised my hand in his presentation and said, think of how many deals you lost in that 300 deals.
Well, he told the story of the deal he lost, the SMI sold, and he lost $1 million.
Yeah, well, there's a little more to that story. He could have, there was a deal there that he missed because he was negotiating too hard. Everybody's that way. I mean, I don't know. I think that...
You're not that way. You actually don't negotiate hard enough sometimes.
Yes, that's my downfall. I'm the gas pedal. That's why I got you guys. You guys are a little more brake pedal than I am, or at least Mark is. It's good to offset each other's talent. So today we want to talk about wearing different hats when you're a broker or a buyer or you're thinking as an operator. Like some of us are all in this industry. We're either wholesalers, flippers, brokers. We're kind of always in real estate, but then we want to be an investor. Then we, or we're just buying deals and we're not thinking about what it's going to take to operate it. Because Trevor and I or even Mike, you're probably looking at numbers and stuff, and you're probably the guy on your team that goes like, guys, I love the numbers on this deal, but after we own it, what are we going to do?
Absolutely.
You're the one that can think out into the future.
Yeah, I talk about bringing spreadsheets to life, right? So the spreadsheet can only do so much, but a spreadsheet doesn't think like an investor. A spreadsheet allocates income and expenses and probabilities and allocations, but it doesn't say, well, how do you actually get there? You have to think your way through that process. And one thing I say a lot to people, and this happens a lot with people that are newer in the retail world, or they've been in the retail, they're realtors, and they want to get into investing, and they're trained and thought to think in the retail world.
In terms of brokering in the retail world.
Brokering, yeah. And then it's really hard to switch your mindset then to, well, how do you think like an investor? So for me, I was taught as an appraiser. It was a huge mindset shift to think like an appraiser to an investor. And the reason is you don't think beyond the retail level. Mm-hmm. And then the majority of people trying to get into investing, the majority, or real estate in general, the majority of social media and knowledge and education out there is retail oriented. You'll get a lot of, or it's guru marketing for a fad for a specific business model. It's not like, well, here's how you think like an investor through different scenarios, through different opportunities, evaluate an opportunity, take time on an opportunity, pass an opportunity. And then once you decide to buy it, what's the process you go through to buy it? And then once you do buy it, what's the process to create it into what it is that you want? And so there's this process you have to go to where I think people get cut off really because we're trained at the retail level, liability purposes, because of liability from brokerages that now dominate the majority of sales, we only give so much information to this point. And so people stop thinking at certain points of time. We can get into that. And then the other part is just, well, where am I getting paid? Right. And so you just get forced typically down this road and your brain stops. And so then in that scenario, you get someone like, oh my gosh, seller financing. Oh my gosh, value add. Oh my gosh, only 150 grand down. Oh, I can get $300,000 line of credit and do the repairs and go no money out of pocket. Okay, great. But you didn't think like an investor. You thought like, I can buy. I can buy. That's all that was the lens that you had. And then you had a broker that was guiding the transaction. And then you had a seller who needed help that was relying on you as the buyer to be a competent investor to think through this process. Can I actually perform? And then once I do buy it, well, how do I get the tenants out? Or how do I renovate it? Or what's a good renovation plan? Or how do I stabilize it and then maximize it? So what are all those other thought processes and actions and hats that you have to wear to get to the end road, which is your end performa?
But it's more fun to just look at a spreadsheet and dream about how much money you're going to make.
When you say thinking like a retail investor, do you mean just thinking about the price of the deal, or what is?
Yeah, well, pricing and then due diligence. These are the best two examples. And where this really came out of was I got a phone call, shout out to Michael. And people don't hesitate to reach out just for, a guy that reached out to me because of social media.
Well, I got a question. Side note, at Investor Lab, I threw out that Gabe would go to lunch with anyone in the room. Did anyone take you up on
I've
that?
been to a few lunches already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But I think you also said 4 of you in the room, and I think that's probably how many ended up on my calendar.
Yeah, so less than 4% took, but that's actually probably a high action rate. Kind of what you get at Investor Lab is that's a high action rate.
Like $10,000 to go to that lunch normally, and you just threw it out for free, and 4 people took it up. Which
well,
is
because
crazy.
a lot of people, they also don't recognize value because they don't know how Gabe's going to add them value because they don't know what value they need or what the vision for their life
They feel like
is.
they probably don't even know what questions to ask.
It would have been the most valuable 2 hours of their entire life.
Well, this is a good segue to Michael. So Michael's seen me on social media. We're in the same market. He's a young broker. He chose to hang his hat, like never talked to us, which is great. Chose to hang his hat at another brokerage where that principal broker cut his teeth kind of in development. They list a lot of new construction. One of their other brokers who just found us some deals, and I think another one, my friend went to this brokerage. No, it's I can't remember. But so he met me before Investor Lab. He went to and didn't even know about Investor Lab. I'm like, how do you not know?
How do you not?
Yeah, met. We
do
met.
You know who I am? I am Mike Nuss.
No, about Investor Lab. Jesus.
We love you, Mike.
And so then we met, and he was, of course, mind blown. Met with Daniel and I, and then he went to Investor Lab, mind blown even more. And then because he's seeing these things, now he's getting a vision. He's putting pieces together. But remember, he's a broker. He thinks like a broker. So he reaches out because I do these little videos on seller avatars. And this is how timing works in the world, right? So I decided to put something out there. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to this avatar that this is the avatar. And so we just had a conversation, and it turned into this master class of the first thing I told him when we sat down before Investor Lab was, you have to shift we didn't even sit down. It was at the bar ordering a drink. You have to shift your mind from thinking like a retailer to thinking like an investor. And that is a really hard process to do because you are taught, and for very good reasons, based on the vacuum that the retail industry brokerages operate in, right? So this is all mandated by NAR down of how retail operates. So you have to shift that mindset to an investor. So anyways, he called me because he has this avatar. So I'll just start with the avatar, and then we can kind of go down that process. So the scenario is a developable piece of land in a good but not great part of town, doesn't really have code developed. There is currently a duplex off to one side. And this is how he explained it. So 2-1 units, some kids are living in the units. It's in a forest, and then it's got this other road that isn't really there, but it's there. And then he's like, and before I even knew it, we kind of okay, well, how do you price it? And you guys are going to price it too high, and so we'll just cut to the shore and get to the math.
Was he trying to get a listing out of this
So
originally?
no, he wants to just talk to me of he doesn't even know. Again, he doesn't know really what he wants to talk about.
So he's like, I think I want to buy deals. I don't really know how to do it, and there may be an opportunity here.
Correct.
Okay.
Or a listing, right? So he's thinking like a broker, and he doesn't know how to break that bridge.
Yeah.
But he knows he has something. Based on the little pieces of information he's gathered, his reticulated activated system, the RAS, is now working for him. and now lined up at a time. So we go over all these scenarios, and then it's like, okay, well, how do you price it? What are you at? So here's what I did. You know, I told the seller that if I could meet you, and then 24 hours later, I do a CMA and I do a cost analysis and a net sheet. Call? It's a referral.
Okay.
So he knows one of the people in the units.
Okay.
So that's how he knows the seller. And so he does all the broker spiel. I'm going to do all these things, CMA, income analysis, all these things. I'm like, okay, great. And then I'm like, well, what number did you come up with? $700,000. So before he told me that, he's like, well, you know, her expenses are like $700 a month, and she sometimes gets $1,100 per month per unit, but they're her kids, and then they don't really pay every month. And so there's no P&L, there's no, right? And so they come up with a valuation of $700,000. And so first it's like, okay, well, let's talk about how do you come up with that valuation? Well, we did the gross rents, gross rents. Well, we can make $4,400 a month of income, and then that's how we come up with $700,000.
Yeah, so you did sales comparables, cost to build, and then
just exactly how
appraisal.
That's exactly how a broker thinks. Correct. Mm-hmm. And then I said, okay, well, great. And then at a 5.6 cap rate, then that's how we came up with $700,000. It's like, okay, great. What is your NOI? And then most people can't answer what is NOI.
If
Net operating
the cap
income.
rate, then doesn't he know the NOI?
He should, but brokers, right? We're in the retail world, and again, a lot of people don't understand language. I don't think he knows I don't know, but anyways,
just the definition, sure.
Yeah. So we worked backwards. I said, okay, well, you have a NOI because you have a cap rate, and then we figured out, and he goes, oh, it's like $3,700. Oh, wait. So, and in this mind, I'm trying to figure it out myself what the NOI is, because you told me 4,400, and he goes, oh, it's like 37 or 3,800. So, okay, mistake number one.
Yeah. There's no expenses baked in.
Not all the expenses, right? That's not your actual expenses. She told you $700 a month, but you didn't think through what the true expenses are. So if you actually think like an owner and you own this building, at best, you're $3,000 a month of income. Okay, great. So an investor is going to look at that and go, at the end of the day, I can get $3,000 a month of income. And then I ask them the question, well, how much debt can that buy? And no offense to Mike, like Mike, reached out to me, and you're learning, and this is the process you go down to learn. Kudos to you. Like, I am so fucking proud of this guy. But he's like, well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if I were to go take $300,000 mortgage payment, take it to the mortgage market, how much debt can that buy? It's like, okay, and then what are the interest rates? So $340,000. And then you ask the question, okay, so do you want to put down $360,000 to maybe get $2,200 a month with $1,400 a month in
It's exactly the way I was taught how to underwrite a deal when I started.
Yeah, but
based on debt coverage. We didn't even use spreadsheets when I started listing deals.
Yeah.
We did it all based on what's your income, what's net income, and what kind of loan will that support. And based on that, if you back into that and say somebody wants to put 25% down, that's what it's worth.
Yep. But brokers don't think beyond that. You learned from an investor who owned a brokerage.
And owned buildings.
And owned buildings. So he didn't think like a broker. He thought like an investor. And what he taught you and what you do really, really well is you can compartmentalize those two mindsets really well. I can't. I cannot be a broker. I can't think like a broker because I can only think like an investor. And brokers are taught, because think of it, they need to sell the property. Mm-hmm. Their goal isn't to, hey, how do I operate? It's done. It's done at closing, unless you have a really forward thinking. And most brokers are taught, this is how you get the deal set. This is how you package it. This is how you sell it. And then your brain turns off. That's what is typically taught.
Yeah, I'm looking for a buyer. I don't really care what happens after the buyer buys it.
Yep.
I just want to sell it.
Yep. And then the other area where brokers typically mess up, or where people typically don't think like actual owners or investors, is highest and best use. So land develop is one of the best scenarios. I can give you some real life. This is a good one, which is, okay, so highest and best use is what's legally permissible, physically possible, financially feasible, and then most productive. Well, brokers, because of liability, they go to planning and zoning. They say, planning and zoning says, you can do this. That's it. That's all I'm doing. I'm advertising. City says you can do this, because one department said legally, they've checked off the legal box, but because of liability, they don't do anything else. They don't talk to any other departments. They don't have any other knowledge of the other departments. They don't know how all those other issues overlay on what's physically possible, financially feasible, and maximally productive. And that's because of NAR. That's because of liability. That's because of contracts. That's because of escaping from due diligence. You contact an attorney, contact an inspector, contact a CPA, right? That is all your job to do. But most people then don't know how do you do those things. So we'll take this lot. And I told him immediately, this is not a deal at $700,000. I didn't even know how they valued it. I figured they were like, hey, you think the duplex is worth this, and then you think the lot is worth this. Worse yet, I come to find out they didn't even think the lot had value. They just looked, But, you said two words, a forest and a road. Mm-hmm. Okay, forest is physically not possible, depending on the tree code. And then the road is financially not feasible. And now your land portion of it isn't there.
Because you got to build a road, or why?
Yeah, because the mandated street improvements, right? So these are forced costs to build a road that are just costs you have to bear. So once you think about the process, go ahead, Trevor.
So when did this kid go from thinking he was trying to list it to thinking he was trying to buy it?
He's not. Well, I don't know if
he's just calling you about listing it?
He's just started. He's just started the process, and that's what's beautiful.
Is he thinking he wants to buy it?
No, he is now. Yeah, so he wants to buy it.
After he talked to you, or before?
I think he probably did. I didn't really get that clear.
I had a meeting with a couple. Actually, it was a family. And same avatar you're talking about. They were builders back in the day. They built a lot of homes and stuff. They found a lot you could build 2 to 4 units on, whatever. The house had been scraped. And they checked in with the city. Sure, you can build, you can build on that footprint, or you can tear it out, build whatever. And it had the zoning. And so it was like, okay, they had the first call, whatever. I think it's probably worth a couple $100,000, whatever the number was, and they bought it. Mm-hmm. Afterwards, they go back and now they do their pre-app and they start going through really what they should have done in their due diligence. And they're sitting with me going, hey, the city of Salem is not the city we used to deal with when we were building. Like, things have changed. Yep. And now they're running them through all of these different hoops on, does it need to be sprinkled? Do you need more ingress? Mm-hmm. Do you need this and that? And like, they're going like, this isn't going to make any sense. Like what? And so they're sitting with me talking about, should we do a duplex or a house and an ADU, or like what's highest and best? Like, that's what we're trying to figure out.
I have no clue.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm
not what I do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I said I can give you a little bit of information, but that's not my wheelhouse. But I gave them ideas on where they could get the most rent and where it might add the most value.
How big was the lot?
I think it was about a half an acre or something, or maybe a quarter acre. It had a house, kind of like they could build a duplex on it, and it has like a barn that can be turned into an ADU.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know it intimately. Yeah, they probably should. But I told them, I mean, just based on the math, I said, I gave them some ideas, and then they told me what they paid for the lot, and I said, well, you're going to have to build at least $1 million property there to make that $200,000 purchase work. So what do we got to do to get $1 million worth of real estate there? Here are the rents we need. You can back into that and know what you've got to do to get there. But the example is, as people will jump in thinking, well, the information even that I knew a few years ago when I was building will be the same, and it's not. You got to really go through that step and think about what's going to happen after I own this. As a broker, I've been on that side. I've been a broker dealing with an investor going like, why in the hell don't these guys just buy the deal? Why are these guys beating them up on price? Why don't we just get the deal closed? Then I've been on the other side as an investor going like, why in the hell does this broker not understand what I'm trying to tell him? This deal doesn't work unless we bring the price down, or whatever the case may be. So when you're on either side of that fence, the broker's trying to get the deal to the finish line. Investor is going, what am I going to do with it once we get to the finish line?
You know what's cool? When you start seeing like some of the brokers we deal with, like at Marcus that sell you deals, like they're not thinking through the deals, and now I'm getting emails where they're thinking through like, hey, you could do the deal this way, this way, or this way. And it's kind of cool to see like their progression, because it's just a young dude doing it.
The problem is if you go ahead.
It's the difference between a fish and learning how to fish.
Yeah.
What I like about brokers that are green is that they don't really know what a deal is, and so they just hunt for deals all the time. We had this thing in the car business where like we'd hire a car salesman, and they barely knew how to spell their own name. In the first month they came out of the gates and they make they sell 20 cars because they don't know what's going on. Then they start to learn how it all works, and they're
sold 20 bad deals.
They're a sick car salesman ever from that point on. Like honestly, like the newness wears off, and then they realize like they just fall in line with everybody else. And so you want brokers. If you are a broker and you want to be an investor, my advice would be careful, because if you get to be too good of an investor, you will stop being a broker. You won't be able to be a broker anymore. This is why Trevor is a shitty broker, and I say that with love, because Trevor looks at a deal and he goes like, no, I don't like that deal, so he could never broker that deal. Yep. A broker who's brand new looks at a deal and goes, well, somebody's going to love it. Let's get it up and list it and find somebody who wants to buy it.
I could never sell anything because I would just go to buy the deal, and as soon as I knew I didn't want to buy it, I would just leave it there. They could be like, yeah, I want to sell it, and I wouldn't ask to list it for them or anything. I'd just be like, oh,
no, that's not a deal.
That's exactly how I do it. But you say all the time, who's the avatar?
Yeah.
It is who is the avatar, and that is the mindset of the realtor really needs to think. Well, and this is realtors, you can be amazing just by thinking as the investor thinks. And so extend that on this thought process. Okay, who's your avatar? Who's going to put 360 grand down and do that? Okay, well, a developer's not going to do it.
There's no return.
Exactly. And then overlay that with market conditions. Well, what kind of market conditions are we in? What can 360 grand of cash buy for you? So the only person that is potentially going to buy that would potentially be a retail person, an owner-occupied. Okay, well, who do you have for tenants?
But that retail person will go buy 360 of Bitcoin instead.
Well, yeah.
Or stocks,
or get a different type of loan, or get a different type of loan to underwrite it differently. But they're not going to take on the tenants, right? So you got to understand the avatar. And then, well, developer's not going to do it because it has trees and an unapproved road. And what you do and what we do really, really well is this is where it's education-based sales. You educate the broker, and the broker needs to educate the seller. And so what's really great about this opportunity is you have a seller who doesn't have a lot of debt. And at the end of the meeting, as I said, okay, this is how you have to communicate to him. At the end of the day, who is the avatar of the seller? You know that their goals, they wanted it as 800. Now they're down to 700 maybe. It still needs to ripen. But their avatar is, I'm a terrible parent.
Whoa.
I'm bleeding every month. They are a terrible parent. They're letting their kids live for free in their unit. Tell me that doesn't bother you as a parent.
It's not good parenting.
It's not good parenting, and they know it, and it's in the back of their mind. So that is driving this thought process, magnified by the point that they're not paying rent, so now I'm bleeding every single month. So I don't need to sell this other than the fact that I'm sick of paying every month out of pocket because I'm told by my secret voice in my head every minute of every day that I'm a bad parent.
But it's free and clear.
There's a little bit of debt. Part of that $700 a month of expense is debt.
Gotcha. Oh.
And so there's a great room here, which is, well, how do you then not be a realtor, and how do you be an investor?
Yeah, you say, hey, seller, do you want to make more than you're making now and not deal with this property?
No,
and
you
get
just
the price you want?
appeal to what the issues are.
It's not the money. It's they want to be done.
Yes.
They want to be done with this relationship with their kids, living off the tip.
No, it's as simple as, I will pay your closing costs. There will be no commissions. There will be no repairs. I will give you $10,000 down. I will take over your mortgage payment.
I'll kick your kids out.
Yeah. I'll take over your mortgage payment. We'll run a net sheet at $700,000 and what that would net you, and we'll put that in a promissory note. And at some point, I'll start paying you some payments, and at some point, you're going to start getting pieces of that promissory note. It's as simple as that, and that's how you shift from a retail broker to how do you actually buy something. Because the retail they should also recognize that you're not taken to the market for 700 grand. And if you do, maybe that's a really good idea, because then the ripening will happen, because the market exposure will show that it's not worth 700,000.
I think I've created a monster, because I see listings pop up now, and they pop up and it's like, that looks a little rich. And like at the bottom of it, I'm thinking, this might be a deal if we could get creative. The bottom of it, all caps, it'll say, seller will not carry. It's like, oh, Trevor, did you already call these guys?
Guess what happens on some of those deals?
They carry.
You still get to carry. Dude, we bought one of those. Seller will not carry. It is the longest time as those 5 houses we bought, and we bought them with 3% down on a seller carry. It was our pay.
They will not carry until they realize they have to carry.
Until they have to carry. Yeah, but a broker, in their mind, they want to do a clean deal. Most of them don't want to get creative. They don't want the exposure. They don't understand maybe what's going on. They don't want to get attorneys involved. So like to a broker, what I want is a seller who's going to be realistic, who's going to give me a nice property, sell at a rate that I know I can put it under contract right away. My phone's going to ring off the hook. We're going to get multiple offers, and I'm going to get paid in a couple months. Like that's what a broker is looking for. A broker's not really looking for the deal where it's like, this guy wants 20% more than what it's worth, but he'd be willing to be creative. Like they don't want to have that conversation because it just takes up too much time or brain.
It's brain fatigue.
Yeah.
Dude, the real life scenario of a seller we're working with where we're going, I'm pushing towards termination and the seller doesn't want to terminate and the broker is great and wants to keep the deal together, but the seller keeps changing their terms. Well, we can't do this. Let's do this and let's do this. And we went from this much down to more down to, and we went from 200 grand to 300 grand. And then I was like, well, last ditch effort, I'll do it for 75 grand down. It's like, but it's the broker who won't let it go down, who keeps pushing the seller like, hey, this period of time is coming. You need to understand, you need to be realized you actually have someone who will think through this. You like this buyer, they will perform. And then they said, okay, fine, we'll go 75 grand down, which then makes it a really good deal. Like, dude, 200 grand down to 75 grand down changes everything of the complexion. And I can still accomplish what you want. We just need a little bit of runway to get where you want to go.
I love this conversation about wearing the broker hat and wearing the investor hat. When you're a broker, I think, we're salespeople. And so we get high off of selling a deal. Mm-hmm. And when you become an investor, you might just want to feel that high again, and so you go out and buy deals. And so the problem with that is you'll get kicked in the nuts after you buy a deal you shouldn't buy.
Yep.
And eventually that you won't chase that high quite as much because you'll realize like, oh, it might be fun to get the deal closed, but afterwards, now I got to write checks. I got to deal with tenants. I got to deal with the city. I got to do all these other things. Owning a deal is a lot less fun than buying a deal or brokering a deal, in my opinion.
So how do you go from a retail investor mindset to an investor mindset?
You just think about what it's like to actually own the property. And even before we get there on the buying side, I'd say that dopamine exists on the seller side as well, where you'll waste your time with the seller tire kickers. They call every letter. They talk to every wholesaler and every investor because they want to do a deal.
Well, it makes them feel good when I get the phone call.
They get the dopamine.
Yeah, I get that call all the time. Hey, Gabe, why don't you call me? I get like 5 calls a week on my property. I'm like, because I know when you're going to sell, you're going to call me. But they feel good. They feel puffed up because it's like, well, I've got people that want my property. It's this is a great market that we're in.
I see it a lot in Portland where, oh man, I met this seller and he has 50 properties. Yeah, so is everybody else. He's not selling any of them. So, but then, okay, so the ownership mindset, right? So you're asking now, how do you transition?
How do you have that if you've never owned anything though? You got to you got to own some stuff and feel the pain, I think, before
and that's
you can do
why
it.
House hacking is such a good way to start. And that's why getting or going from an owner occupied into a landlord position, because you incrementally grow your way into it. So the way I look at it is you can incrementally grow into the person you want to become, or you can hire someone who already is that person, which is easy to do if you kind of know the process of what it takes to become that person. Or you go all in and then you just spend a whole lot of money and hope that cures all the problems. But I prefer incremental change.
How did house hacking teach you, Trevor?
Yeah, so you learn all of the basics of like, okay, how do you actually find a deal? How do you get funding? How do you partner on a deal? How do you analyze on the front end? What do the numbers look like after you buy it? How do you manage it? How do you fill it with tenants? So it teaches you all of the basics.
And the worst thing that happens is you just own a home and you don't have any roommates.
Yeah, your worst case scenario is you are a homeowner, which is the American dream.
So then you had some problems though, because you rented out to some people that caused some issues for you, and you had to live with them.
Yeah, I didn't know you were supposed to. So I did all my buddies at first, and that was fine. And then I didn't really know what
leases. You knew them.
Yeah, I didn't know what leases were or any of that thing. So I kind of learned, and I tried to do leases and learned how to collect rents. And the next time I did it, I didn't have anyone else I knew, and I didn't know how to screen because I didn't have to do it the first time. So I didn't screen people, and I'd be like, "Oh, manager at Domino's? That's a good job." And then comes in, and then I'm living in this property where you're punching holes in the doors, and it's just insane human being. And I was like, that, and then I learned about screening, and then that didn't happen again.
Making pizza all day makes you an angry man, huh?
And what it comes down to is in the pro forma is there's 3 line items that are the biggest, hardest line items to figure out, and so we allocate a percentage to it. What's your vacancy rate is a percentage. How much is maintenance? You throw a percentage at it. What are your CapEx? You throw a percentage at it. Okay. But what is your vacancy rate when you hire the pizza man, or you let the pizza man move in and then your maintenance cost because you let the pizza man move in, versus if you have good screening and it's vacant for a little bit longer, and then you don't have to kick him out, and then you don't have the maintenance. So how do you actually see costs go out the maintenance door? Is it all in 1 month? Is it over a year? Is it over 3 months? Is it at a turn? Is it because you have landscaping every month and pest every single month and roof maintenance every month? How are you expending those maintenance expenses? And then what about capital expenditures? Well, that's where you want to know where your furnace is at, and your water heater, and your appliances, and your roof, and your windows, and your envelope, and your foundation, because that's where, well, when do you have to spend the capital expenses?
Never.
Right. And if you're thinking from a gross rent scenario, which is, hey, I can get this much rent, I make this much income, I can get this loan, well, then you don't think, oh, fuck, my roof is going to go out, or the furnaces are going to go out, or what roommates am I going to move in here? So that's what I think of as those 3 buckets. How do you fill them out?
Well, yeah, and people overthink those on the front end when you can just bake it into your deal and take
that's
care
the
of them.
problem. No, that is the problem, is you think you can just put it in a calculator, and you don't think, how do you get to a 5% vacancy rate? How do you get to 5% maintenance?
No, I mean, like, people get too worried, like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to replace this roof in 3 years and it's $15,000, where it's like, just pay the seller $15,000 more now and bake it into your loan, have them do it, and now you like the deal at $400, and now it's $415 and you have a brand new roof. It's an even better deal, actually. Like,
well, that's how you sell. That's how you make your buying decision, is you say, okay, I like $400, but I can't afford a $15,000 CapEx in the next 3 years. Okay, I need the roof repaired so my pro forma isn't blown up by the roof in 3 years, right? So you take context, you take your pro forma, you take the asset, you take the deal structure, and then you put it into play. Well, what's it going to look like for that first year? And so what I do for like my development projects is I literally do month by month. Here's how the cash flow liquidates. And then that's what I show my investors is here's our 24-month cash flow projection based on a 12 to 18-month project. So you can see where are the areas where our account's going to get a little bit negative? What are the milestones that we're going to try to hit early, so that way we never approach that level of negativity? But most people don't think about that. They think about income and expenses, but not cash flow. And cash flow is what brings it to life.
What do you think's going through a broker's mind when they decide they want to be an investor?
They don't like being a broker.
They don't like it, or they feel like, man, I'm hustling every day. It'd be nice to have some passive income.
Yeah, they want to get passive income and retire. That's like everyone's attraction.
Because they're like, oh, I'm making good money brokering, but I want to have some steady income, so I don't have to work. I don't want to have to do it forever. I don't want to have to work necessarily as hard, or I can weather the ups and downs.
There's no ending to brokering.
So one of my favorite Logan DeVos quotes is that passive income is a tax term.
Yes.
And so I think to go back, for people to understand, it's one thing that we do really good on this podcast is talk about the trials and tribulations of owning buildings. Like, owning buildings is honestly not that cool. Like, I mean, the money you can make from it is a lot. We go out and buy, I mean,
TikTok tells me it's really freaking cool.
So I think buying deals is fun. I think the dreaming part of it is fun, or whatever, to think that you're going to have this passive income. But really, the only way you can be a passive investor is to go out and make a bunch of cash and plug it in with a good syndicator, good sponsor, and let them go run real estate deals for you and just make a return. Like, honestly, that's the only way I think that you can be passive. Other than that, you better get into this understanding that you are taking on a whole new responsibility, a whole new job, and you have to build a business plan. And like you say, maximize. You have to execute that business plan. And everybody always talks about how the money is made in the buy. And I can't tell you how many deals that I've seen get ripped where the money could have definitely been made in the buy, but they completely botched their business plan and they never got it to where it could have gone.
Tell your Midwest story.
They ended up exactly like the guy who sold it to him, who never made any money on the property. They just pass it from one dreamer to the next dreamer and never make any money.
To answer your question, people want to get into real estate for upward mobility. It is the asset class that drives upward mobility the most. But the reality is most people that own or invest in real estate made their money somewhere else.
When we tell everybody go own real estate, this is what we preach. Buy the real estate, own the real estate. What I want to do is just put an asterisk next to that and go, don't think that this is going to solve all your problems where you won't have to work anymore. If your goal is to own buildings because you don't want to work, you're getting in the wrong business. Just take some money and park it with somebody.
Well, you can get to that point too through owning enough buildings and then trading out of them or handing them off.
Once you build a base.
Once you build it, yes.
Yeah.
But you've done is fast forward retirement. environment.
Yes, but you get a such higher leverage on your time through owning real estate, because now when you own this piece and you are sleeping and the market is going up in value, you aren't doing anything at that time, or someone else is managing
your equity becomes very passive.
But you get that if you're working your job somewhere else. You really get the momentum if you're working in real estate and you own real estate, because your working hours are benefiting your passive income in a way that it isn't if your working hours go somewhere else.
I think you work even harder on your income and you build your portfolio at the same time. That's human nature. I feel like if your dream is, I'm worn out and I'm working too hard and these clients are pissing me off and I'm sick and tired of brokering deals, like that's a bad reason to want to go become an investor. I think if you love brokering, you're making some money, you got a few bucks in your pocket and you're like, I'm starting to figure out what a good deal is. You can look at, the next 10 deals you do and there's one of them in there. You go, you know what? Here's one for you, and here's one for you, and here's one for me. Now I get to own a building too, and we should all get to own buildings. I think it's very achievable. I just think that going in, if your motives are to work less, you're going to be disappointed, because you're going to end up working more at your day job to cover the roof or whatever you got to do on your building. And now you own your building, and you might go a couple of years into this like, what was I even thinking? I see investors all the time. They're like, this does not work for me. It's not, I'd rather just put my money in the stock market or let it sit.
Yeah. So Dane talks about this, and it's a good thing because he talks to a lot of people and they're like, I don't want to buy this thing and then it's going to cost me $300 a month for the next year. Like, they can't conceptualize it. And he's like, Dane always tells him, what if I were to call this your 401k?
And you add $300
a month to your 401k, except for it gives you like 10 times the amount of money back out at the end. And he's like, if you thought about it like that, would that make sense? And they're like, oh, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And people don't think about it like that. They're like, they just think about cash flow. They don't think about all the other ways they can make money on it, and that negative cash flow, once they get the deal stable, it goes away, and then it positively.
Then you get positive, and then you get a few buildings like that.
They want to start with like positive day one on freaking 100% leverage, which you can do, but you can't do that as a beginner because you don't know what that deal is, and you would say no to it.
But that's again just understanding your performance. So all you do is you take your negative $300 a month times the amount of months that it's going to be negative, and it's a cost in your
on the front end. So if you told most people like, hey, rather than putting $20,000 down and then bleeding $6,000, if you could put $26,000 down and then break even, would you do it? And they'd be like, oh, hell yeah. You're like, that's the exact
same. And all you're doing is thinking through, well, I have negative cash flow. Okay, well, what does that mean? How long will it be there for? You just play it out into life. But most people don't think past the performance.
Why is that? Why is it that we're like human nature is just like every month I don't want to have bad news every month that I got to write a check to my building?
People are thinking too short term and they can't delay gratification.
So how do you think longer term and not delay gratification and delay gratification?
I think, it's the process. Are you a process-oriented thinker or are you a outcome dreamer, right? So dreamers don't typically think about process. Doers just go through the process. And if you think about the process, you understand there is a process, you focus on the process, then you just think through the process. But if you're just dreaming, what it would be like to live on an island and own this real estate, there's no process there. You're not connected to any reality of what it takes to make that performer work.
So let's talk about that for a second. If you build a good, I heard Mark say several times when you interviewed him, like you have to really be thoughtful. You have to stop. He talked about praying and stopping and spending 4 hours to make a decision and looking at a deal from every single angle to make sure you could see it from every single angle. How do you build a really thoughtful business plan that's considered all of the downside or every downside risk you could see, and then execute on that business plan once you own it?
I guess I disagree with that portion, because I feel like you want to figure out the end goal, where you're at now, and the next most immediate step, and then you're just thinking in smaller steps along the way.
So you're going to take it as it comes. So we're going to close the deal and figure it out as we go.
It's all going to change. Like when I was buying my first deal versus what I'm buying now, I'd never thought I would be buying what I'm buying today at any point. And your goals drastically change. So like there's no point in overanalyzing.
So you're thinking more about your overall philosophy and goals in the whole portfolio. I'm talking about one individual deal, whether that's a house or 100-unit complex or whatever it is. Like, how do you build a really good business plan and then execute on that business plan. Like you almost have to be more engaged with the building the day after closing than you were the day before closing.
Yeah, I mean, on the front end, you have to figure out where your market rate rent is. Does it support on your current debt amount once you get it there? And then what does it cost to get there? So going through all the units, being like, okay, in this unit, I have to replace cabinets, flooring, this is how much it costs. How do I get this money? Do I bake it in the loan? Do I raise more money for it? And then you can literally do the math and you can see the vision of what the end product is, but you have to like do the math on the interim and make sure you have enough funds to get there.
But what I'm asking is, what do you do afterwards? How do you execute?
So as a beginner, that's the hard part. It's like, I'm going to self-perform this work maybe. Am I going to hire these contractors out? Where do I get the contractors, right?
What I've seen in my experience is I've met some people like us that I would not consider us to be great operators. Me and Trevor. Mark, yes, great operator. I've met people that are like Mark that are such great operators that they go and buy one building or two buildings. And those buildings, like, are the best buildings I've ever seen. They run like machines. They print cash. They're full. They have great tenants. The building's in great shape, but they can only own two buildings because that's literally all they're doing all the time is just focused on those two buildings. Me and Trevor will buy two buildings. We'll forget we even bought them and we want to go buy 10 more. So we have to build a team around us that executes our business plan, because otherwise, I mean, we're just the deal junkies. We just want to go buy more deals. We don't want to sit and worry about, here, we gave you the business plan, go do the business plan. So do you hire property management? Do you hire asset management? Do you bring on partners that love to geek out on maximizing properties? I guess there's a lot of different angles you could approach it from. But for somebody that's just going to go out and be like, hey, I'm a broker today and I want to be an investor and I'm going to learn how to write this business plan today, I close on the deal. What are you going to do tomorrow? You're going to quit brokering deals and go run your building? Like, you're taking on it's a whole nother job.
Well, and that should be relatively known before you make an offer and get an escrow. Then second, the due diligence process between offer accepted and closing is you're thinking through bringing reality to the pro forma, right? So you're creating a pro forma based on, I'm going to self-manage, so my management cost isn't going to be there, or I'm going to do it for $100, right? So you're saying on the front end, I'm making an offer because this is how my pro forma looks. The due diligence process is when you get to bring life to that thought process. But at the end, what do you do on the closing, which I hope you had an idea of at the beginning before you made an offer, it's self-evaluation and self-actualization. Who am I? What are my resources? What am I capable of? What am I not capable of? What do I need to hire out? What can I do on my own? And who do I want to become? Actualization, right? So here's who I am. Here's what I want to become. What should I learn through this process? What should I not learn through this process? So maybe I should learn property management and self-management, but maybe I should hire a GC or a handyman so I'm not learning the maintenance side of it right now. And then maybe after I've got my systems down and I've got tenants in it and I've got it operating, now maybe I can start doing some work on it. And so now I can learn the maintenance side and the asset management side of it. But I think the biggest mistake people think is, I know what to do on day one after owning it.
You don't.
Most people don't, because they didn't self-evaluate and self-actualize before they made the offer, which really should have an implication on your pro forma, right? So like my pro forma, my calculator, like Daniel came to me the other day, it's like my calculator is loaded up with freaking expenses. I've got cat tax expense in there. I've got so many expenses, and I changed our ROI from 15% to 20%. So I increased the expenses. I increased what I want from an profitability standpoint. And now I'm also looking at it a profit per month standpoint. So I'm evaluating it in this way because my realization of where our resources are, say my pro forma needs to look like this, so that way we can keep our business going. But a first-time flipper is going to do the deal themselves and get they'll come up with a much higher price. They don't think about cat tax. They don't think about profit per month. They don't, right? And so on the front end, you should have an idea of what the back end looks like, because you are clear of who you are. It's a self-worth statement. And then who do I want to become? Your pro forma needs to match that.
You know what scares me the most about deals these days? High rents and low expenses. We used to never even think about insurance before. We'd call the insurance guy the day of closing, go, oops, we forgot to tell you we're buying this, put insurance on it. Now, before we even go under contract, I'm telling these guys, go get insurance quotes. Let's see if we can even get insurance on it. Then we buy a building that's got one rent, and I think, wow, that's a pretty good rent. And then you realize after you bought it, like, oh, you can't get that rent anymore, or they were not doing proper screening, or they had sex offenders, or whatever was going on in there. Like, you take over a building and you're buying it on an income you can no longer get anymore. I think that, you got to be really, really careful when you do a new deal. We're always looking for value add, like, oh, these rents are too low and we could clean the place up and raise the rents or whatever. But I think you really got to look at that from the other angle of, we may actually be the opposite of value add. We might buy a building and not be able to achieve this rent roll and not be able to get these expenses.
And we've looked at some of those. Yeah. I think to answer the question, how do you go to retail mindset to investor mindset, is you have to start doing deals and you'll learn
experience. Experience is really,
or partners. Yeah. Like when I started, I still always have partners, and that's what taught me is I was able to come in with people who knew what they were doing. And I learned about asset management and property management and all that stuff from my partners. Yep. I didn't know. If I would have gone off on my own, I could have learned it, but I probably would have stubbed my toe like your $300,000 loss story.
A really good book is Who Not How, but I think the early investor should be who and how. So you should ask the questions of how. How do I get 5% vacancy? How do I get 5% maintenance? How do I get 5% CapEx? And then who do I ask those questions to? That makes sense. So like ask the questions of how do I get, well, $150 a month for electrical is really easy because you call PGE and they say it's $150 a month. Okay, great. That's a lot different than, 5% vacancy. So you call your property manager, you call the other landlords, like, what are you achieving for vacancy? Okay, great. What are the processes that you're doing right now to achieve that vacancy rate? Oh, well, it's actually really hard because what we do is we do a pre-walkthrough, pre-move out walkthrough with the tenants. We get an idea what the property's like. We already have pictures for it. We already have a marketing package. We're setting up times with the tenant on when we can show the unit. We're marketing the unit 2 weeks before it's available. We're lining up all these processes to ensure we only have 12 days of vacancy when that unit is turned. Oh, but we also have to plan that of this 12 unit building, 3 of those units are going to need to be turned, and they're going to be 45-day turns. One's going to be a 90-day turn. Well, if you ask me that question, guess what? You got all those freaking answers. But if you ask your friend who owns one property that's owned it for 6 months, they have no idea who that person is asking that question.
You bring up a good point. I want to bring a property manager with me to every walkthrough. Like the time to bring in your property manager is on day one to get them involved on what are the rents, where can we improve. And if you've got an asset management team or you got other people that can get involved in that's a really smart thing to do. If you're going to self-manage, I recommend still underwriting it with a management fee built in because your time has value. And one day, hopefully, you won't be managing that anymore because if you are going to be a self-manager, you're not going to buy very many units before you decide this is too much for me. I don't want to buy any more of these.
And it's okay to put an 8% management fee in there and have your asset bleed by 8% and make the decision of I am self-managing and I'm paying myself $200 or I'm losing this much. Just compartmentalize it for what it is. So you think of it as a role. So you think of it as a hire my way out. This is a role. I'm doing it for now for these purposes. A, to not bleed cash flow because I have the time to do it, and B, to learn the processes. And then once I get to those two things are accomplished, now I hire someone. And so you made it really clear that day one I'm doing this, but day 104 I'm hired out of this position.
So would you tell your guy Michael? Would you tell him to self-manage on his first one?
Oh, absolutely, and
just
he knows
to learn
the people in it. So it's really clear the offer he has for her, which is, hey, here's the things that I can offer for you. I can work with the tenants. I can get the income stream there. I would. Because especially if you structure it with 10 grand down and taking over your mortgage payment, that just allows you to have a cash cushion to learn mistakes, to that's your college education program. And everyone has it. It's better if you can do low resources at the acquisition so you have a bank of resources at the end. I think a lot of people use resources up the front and then they have to figure out the resources afterwards. So deal structure matters. And so how do I do this? Who do I ask? And now he has a master class on I can actually get this deal done And the other thing is he's a good guy and he's put good social capital into the world. So as he talks to the person and as he stumbles and he comes across, you just make another phone call to that same person.
I need help.
Exactly. And then they'll do the deal for you. That's what new people should understand is mentors will do the deal for you. They'll just tell you how to get it done.
Yeah.
And you don't need to worry about every step. Just say, hey, here's where we're going. Here's the next step. I'll get to there. Then I'll fuck up and then they'll fix it. And allow that to happen.
Then they can go to lunch with me for $10,000.
So let's dive into the.
Oh, God, don't get me fucking started on gurus.
So you get the question a lot, and I think all of us do, is when do you self-manage versus use property management?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what your goals are. If you want to own 10 units, 20 units, and you want to self-manage and you really have the heart to deal with tenants and there are some people out there that are like innkeepers, like they're in their DNA. They like the hospitality side of the world. They like short-term rental, mid-term rental. They like to know all of their tenants. I don't know my tenants. The way I was taught was I wanted to build a big portfolio. And I knew from day one when I got my first duplex that I was going to hire property management because I did not want to be involved in that process. It's not that I don't love people and love my tenants and all the other stuff. It's just I just wanted to run it like a business. And I was partnering with somebody who owned a management company. Yeah. So that was, for me, that was the way I did what Mike's talking about, where it's just like, I don't know how to build a business plan. I don't know what this will rent for. I don't know how to deal with tenants and all that stuff. So we'll just do a deal, and I'll bring in the people who know how to do that. And they just had ownership of the deal.
Yeah. I self-managed until I had 30-something units or so.
You managed 30 doors yourself?
Up to there. That's when I kind of flipped.
Were you doing another day job while you were doing that?
Yeah.
So you were managing 30 doors and doing a day job?
Yeah, which I like most people starting out managing themselves because then they learn what property management takes, what a good and bad property manager does, and it's easier for them to conceptualize and control more of when they're getting into the deal. So I feel like it's easier to start that way. But where it becomes a problem is when you view buying more properties as more work, and then you stop buying more real estate because you're self-managing. Yeah. That's when it's
dangerous.
Problem. Because owning more real estate is good. So anything that stops you from doing that, you need to flip.
And that's the self-evaluation process. So the way my mind works, my personality is I love people, but I don't like people. Meaning I can't be around people. I'm an introverted person. I can only be around people for so long period of time. Like I love you.
Drains your energy.
It's so hard to get Mike to come to anything with us. You know how many things I've invited him to this week?
He's a lone wolf.
Pickleball, boating. He keeps saying no.
So, but
he
if
comes to Deal Junkies though.
He's pissed off about it.
Because I have to. But but I want to have an outcome. I want to know I want to build a management company. So we went at 11 units to 23. That's when I transitioned to self-management. And then somewhere between 23 and 50, hired everything out. But I needed to know how to hire people. What rules are they going to do? So even though I love people but don't like people, I did leasing, which fucking sucked. I hated meeting people and being in there and selling them on the unit. I hated
that. Seems like that would be kind of the fun part of
they don't
management.
Show up all the time. And you have to do it at a certain time. It messes with your schedule. It's just not
I just wouldn't want to deal with the crazies and the hoarders and kicking people out and
filling out the freaking bank account and like all the things that are managed. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do it.
There's software for that.
But you need to learn it. It's still, you still have to deal with all that crap.
To self-manage a house takes like 5 minutes a month.
I'm so excited so when you have your own custom AI agent that can now communicate with utility company chat bots, and now that is fully 100% automated. Oh my gosh.
That's pretty cool.
Take our staff out of that process.
Why are you communicating with utility people?
Swapping utilities over and tenant moves out, it goes to...
That is the most basic fucking
question. Property managers are doing that all now for me.
In 30 units, you had to move utilities
when I was
around.
Doing that, yeah. But now
when you have
he's forgotten already.
Yeah.
He's not even 30 yet, and he's already forgotten about the tough times.
Yeah. Management companies, they have leasing reports and vacancy reports and all that stuff.
Lots of bills to pay.
Oh.
So when do you think someone flips from or does
from self-management to management? I think it just depends on the part of, I say this a lot, that people are unique and real estate is unique, and everybody wants something different from real estate, and there are people out there that what they want is that interaction with the people. They want to know their tenants. They want to be involved in the property. They want to go work on units. They like it. They like swinging a hammer. They like a paintbrush. Those
people are crazy.
Well, I mean, they're not like us. They probably think we're crazy. They're probably like right now they're listening to Bob Marley and like painting a wall, and they're happy as can be, and we're like going like, we got to go find a deal. You know, I mean, there's different ways to live your life. I think that if you decide that you want to really own a large portfolio and take real estate as far as you can go, I think it's better to bring in professional property management as soon as possible. Especially be talking to them, even if you're going to self-manage the first couple of properties before you pass it on. I would start those conversations. One of the things I've seen with self-managers is if they self-manage and that is their whole business model, and let's say they do that for 30 years, there's a couple of things that happen. They tend to be pride of ownership owners, so they tend to spend a lot of money on their properties because they're the kind of owner that says, I don't want to own something I wouldn't live in. And so
I don't know. I feel like I see the opposite with a lot of self-managers.
Sometimes a slumlord. You do get pride of ownership and you get slumlord in the whole spectrum in self-management. But what I've seen is okay, so we can talk about both. Pride of ownership owners will spend a lot of money on their property, but they won't ever raise rents because they love their tenants.
Those are the best properties.
I tell those owners, you're running a nonprofit, you're running a charity. So if you're keeping that rent $500 low for that tenant because you like them, that's fine. But just know that that's the same thing as writing a check to your favorite charity for $500 every month. If the charity you pick is that one family that lives in that one unit, then that's up to you. I'm not going to judge you for what charity you want to run. Just know that that's what you're doing. And so then when that owner decides that they want to pass it off because now it's time to go travel and have fun and retire, they pass it off to me to manage it, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to raise those rents. And when I raise the rents, tenants are going to start leaving. And then when tenants start leaving, there's going to be turnover costs. And now, even though their rent roll is getting better and better and better, and the value of their building is going up, their cash flow is actually going to go down for a while because we're going to have to go and reinvest into some of these units because they've had people living there for 20 years.
Cost $10,000.
Yeah, when you hear an owner
$700 a month.
Yeah, when an owner brags about my tenants stay there for 10 years or 20 years or whatever, to me, that's like, I hear that and I'm like, that's the opposite of what I'm trying to achieve in my business. A slumlord self-manager is like, I don't do screening. I let the sex offenders move in. I let the felons move in. But I charge $200 over market rent for units that I'd have no heat in them and the roof's caving in. And that's a totally different business model. Honestly, from like, we've talked about this before, from a just how much money goes in your bank account perspective, that might be one of the best. The problem is then you run the building into the ground, and one day you got to go find me and Trevor who will pay too much for it, and then you and I got to go spend a whole bunch of money to turn the property over.
The cool part is if you do that long enough, your building still goes up in value, even though it's deteriorating, which is crazy.
Yeah, but it has a okay.
Oh, yeah, so I don't think you want to be that person.
It's a bad mojo.
Yeah, I don't want to be that person.
So
but it works for a lot of those guys.
I just started recording videos while I walk Max, and then I'm like posting them. I actually started TikTok and all that stuff. I just did a series on the bad mindset around low rents. Because it's not good.
It's not good at all.
Yeah.
So here's what I find with
so many problems
with any owner. So let's talk about the slumlord owner who comes in and now he decides this problem is too much. I want to hire property management. The same sort of thing will happen is the property manager will come in and they'll go, well, we've got to get rid of these tenants because they're bad and they're not paying rent or they're doing whatever. And then when we put in new tenants, guess what? The people who actually are not felons and not sex offenders don't want to live there at that property. And so then it's very hard to rent those units. So we kick out a tenant who's not supposed to be there. We spend $20,000 on a turn, and then I'm trying to rent it to somebody who will pass screening, and they won't pass screening because nobody wants to live in this complex. So, like, I think the other thing that I see is it's very, very, very difficult for a self-manager who's done it as a career to pass the keys off to a property manager because it's like sending your kid to daycare. Nobody's going to raise your kid the way you raise your kid. And when you just say like, well, you know, how come somebody left a mattress in front of my dumpster? I would have had that out of here by 10 a.m. that morning. It's like, guys, this is not the way a professional property management company runs. Sure, we'll swing by 3 times a week or whatever, and if we got to take a mattress, we'll take a mattress. But that's just not. We're not going to love it the way you love it. Like, we're going to run it like a business. We're going to do a good job. We're going to screen tenants. You know, and by the way, I've had owners too that were like, I don't like it that you moved in somebody that's on Section 8 or that you moved in somebody that's a different race or color or all these things. It's like, guys, like we have laws around this. There's fair housing laws. Like we don't screen based on some of this stuff. Like, well, these people, I want to go see their unit that they're moving from before they even move in to make sure they keep good house cleaning and stuff. It's like, you don't do that in the real world. That's not how it works.
And that's the self-evaluation. They have these things in their mind of the way they think that really make it difficult for them to move beyond self-management into someone else managing it for them.
I bought a fourplex once from a gal. She inherited it from her dad. And this fourplex, literally, she could not sleep at night because she was worried about what people were doing inside the units in this fourplex. It was just something that was passed down to her. Like, it ruined her life. Like, she couldn't hire a property manager. She couldn't grasp the fact that she had tenants that had the right to do whatever they want in that unit other than tear it apart or do something illegal, right? That's their unit. They can live in it however they want to live in it. And so she sold it to me, but she sold it purely on, I got to be able to sleep at night. Like, it was going to give her a heart attack, owning a fourplex and self-managing. So some people love it. Some people hate it. I recommend, if you're going to grow a portfolio, maybe do it for a deal or two so you know what you're talking about. But once you know what it takes to evict a tenant, get a squatter out, deal with a hoarder, deal with some of the stuff that you got to deal with, like, be done with that part of it because it's really not the fun part, and go buy deals and turn it over to property management.
I'd also say, if you're a control freak, just don't get into real estate.
Yeah.
That'll just drive you fucking crazy.
It will.
Yeah.
You got to let go of some things.
You got to let go of control. You got to let go of some control. Understand it's a mirage, what you do, and understand what you actually do have and don't have, and then you can sleep well at night.
It's another reason why I tell people don't go buy a vacation rental that you want to use part of the time and let other people use it.
Just go rent one that you want to use.
Yeah, because every time you show up, you're going to be mad that somebody scratched the floor, put a hole in the wall, or did something. And
so many people say, you got to get a short-term rental in Scottsdale. Why?
I'll just go rent a short-term rental.
This is like a lot of work. There's so many there I can rent. Why buy one?
We'll go buy a 20-plex in Scottsdale, and then we'll go rent an Airbnb and play golf. And
shout out to Jaron. I don't even have to rent a place anymore. I get to go there for free.
What?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get to go to Scottsdale for free.
Are you going to take us with you, or are you going to go by yourself because you're a lone wolf?
You want to go get this weekend?
I'll go.
All right. You go to Scottsdale with me?
Yeah.
The problem is I got to fly out.
Oh, no. Okay.
Oh, there's a problem.
No,
I'd have to
wasn't
fly
a real
out.
invite.
No, it is. So fly out Friday night and back Sunday.
Yeah, I don't
So it's
care.
only one day of golf.
Trevor and Dane just fly around the world all the time. They don't care. We got to get a Deal Junkies jet so you guys can just go play golf anywhere you want.
Long way away from that.
All right, we going to wrap it up?
Yep. So moral of the story, buy more deals and just learn as you go.
There you go.
And maybe self-manage, but probably get property management.
Start the car.
You want to go to Rare Bird Property Management or SMI Property Management? Depends on where you're at.
If you're cool,
what's the size of the deal?
If you're cool, go to River.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot, Deal Junkies. We love you. We love recording this podcast. Please share us, subscribe, and we will see you next time.